Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Thomason, and I am the one who thought that this might be a good idea to bring back. I thank you. I am the founder of Connect Beyond Festival, and I'm a little out of practice of doing this, and by this I mean public life. So I don't know about the rest of you, but this is, it's been a little crazy getting back to doing things in person. And my watch just let me know backstage that my heart rate was up while I hadn't been moving, which just confirmed that the anxiety wasn't just in my head, it was actually running through my entire body. So, haven't been on a stage in 3 years in front of a group of people, and I'm so glad that I can't see any of you right now, because it's so dark. But yeah, I'm glad to be here, and it's been hard to bring something back to in person, and I think that we all feel that. And I just want to acknowledge that all of you that were able to make it here tonight. I know that life has been hard, and it took a lot for you to be here, just like it took a lot for us to be able to be here. So first and foremost, thank you. Yes. So thank you. I'm very grateful, and it is a small and mighty team that actually makes Connect happen. And I have to thank a few people, as you know, you need to do. And first and foremost is Matt Rodriguez, who has been my rock for a long time. I don't do an event without Matt Rodriguez. And I need to thank Zach Kilberg and Iz Webb from Social Construct Films. They're my film partners. They're the reason we have these amazing films as part of the programming every year. They're the reason why I know Dr. Ben Gilmer, who's going to come out in a little bit here. And I need to thank Greya, who's been super helpful. And then there's a number of other people that I need to thank: Richard Garzarelli, Lynn Benjamin, who have helped to just guide me in a way and make some connections for me. And then our sponsors and partners. So, right, because all of those things happen, these things happen because of other people. So Explore Asheville's been great. I'm so excited about this new collaboration with Sundance Collab. So maybe you were a part of our first event today, which was a online writers cafe with Sundance Collab, which was really exciting. We're going to be presenting a panel together tomorrow called Storytelling for Impact. And we're going to continue to do events throughout the year. So great, exciting new development for Connect Beyond. Taylor Guitars is here tonight, and super excited about the show that they're presenting with us tomorrow, the Epic Convergence. We had a group of artists who have not met before in the studio at Echo Mountain today, who's also a sponsor. So you'll get to see what the fruits of their labor tomorrow at the Orange Peel. So, and thank you to the Wortham Center for having us, and also the Orange Peel tomorrow. Also, thank you to Mountain Madre, who's helping to keep people fed, and New Belgium as well. So thank you. Okay, so I started Connect because I feel the power of stories can really change lives. I personally have had many of films and books and things like that have changed my life. Ask me about Armageddon at some point, and I will tell you. But I thought that this was a really great way to share stories and create a platform for voices that needed to be heard. And also to showcase that one person can really make a difference. And sometimes, especially now, definitely feels like that is, it's a little daunting. But the fact of the matter is people are doing that every day. And people in our own community are doing that. And I am so very excited about this first reading and performance, because it takes place right here in our own community of Asheville in Fairview. And so you may have heard the This American Life episode that Dr. Benjamin Gilmer was a part of, called Dr. Gilmer and Mr. Hyde. It was one of the most downloaded episodes. I met Dr. Gilmer through Zach and Iz, who were working on a film deal. He was part of the festival for 2018, as was Johnny, and they knew each other unbeknownst to me, and Johnny and I have known each other through music for years. And so now Ben's got this book, and you will get to sit and listen to this amazing story about Ben's journey and his fight to help a man with mental illness. And also, it is getting turned into a film. So what I'm hoping, Ben, Zach, is in 2 years, as I'm guessing as the film world works, that we'll be able to premiere this film in 2 years. And all of y'all that are sitting here can be like, oh, I was there. I was there before it was a film, right? And so we're going to hear from Ben, and we're also going to hear from Johnny Irion, the talented Johnny Irion. So play some songs that are based on Ben's story. So stick around. There's going to be a little bit of an intermission, and then we're going to have The Art of Making It, this incredible film, and a Q&A with the filmmakers after. But first, we have, if I could bring to the stage, Dr. Benjamin Gilmer and Johnny Irion.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. My name is Johnny Irion. I'm a rock and roll legend.
It's nice to meet you, Johnny.
We are so thrilled to be the opening event tonight for Connect, which has just been an amazing experience before. So I'm thrilled that everyone will have the opportunity to participate this weekend in a collection of stories that cross multiple media and will bring us together in a way that contributes to a collaborative voice. So that's what this festival is about, and we are about to share our collaborative voice tonight. I want to firstly introduce Johnny Irion. I wanted to be a rock star, but he's the rock star. Johnny Irion, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. G.
Johnny has been a good friend for years, and he's an amazing musician. He's played all over the world. He's played with incredible people, but his music is personally just touches me. I'm also a big crybaby, just in case, just to prepare yourselves. There are going to be some tears up here tonight. But I'm so thrilled to have Johnny here, who has written some songs about this book, which is a huge honor, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means: music, literature, film, and how we can all collaborate together. So thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to start with a little story. I don't know, I can't really see you in the audience right now, but the story begins like this. In 2003, I was a young medical student and went to Broughton Hospital, which is one of our public hospitals, psychiatric institutions in North Carolina. And that was the first summer it was my first baptism in medicine. It was the first time that I was in an actual clinical setting as a medical student. It was the first summer that I was trying to fall in love. Well, that was the easy part, but with my wife, Deirdre, who's here tonight. And our first extended date was in a mental hospital. And that summer, I discovered many things. I discovered love. I discovered our healthcare system for the first time. I discovered some 13 very disturbed patients that I took care of for that summer. And I also discovered a man whose name was Dalton Gilmer, who was part of the geriatric ward. And I didn't know anything about this man. I'd met all the geriatric folks on the ward. But this man, unbeknownst to me, would change my life. And this is how it starts. By the time a report was filed with the Washington County Sheriff Department, Dr. Vince Gilmer was already back in North Carolina, over 100 miles away. He'd driven south in the pre-dawn on the winding two-lane country roads and slightly straighter highways that penetrate the heart of Appalachia. He'd passed through the moonlit shadows of the Blue Ridge Mountains, through fog-filled hollers and sleeping mountain communities, crossing the North Carolina state line through the Cherokee National Forest. Ask Vince how he got home that night, and he probably wouldn't be able to tell you. The precise route is lost to time, lost to the shadows, lost to darkness. What happened next has never been fully explained. Sometime that night, they stopped at an Arby's for dinner, Dalton's first real meal out in over a year. Sometime that night, Dalton turned to Vince and began to hum the song, Ba Ba Black Sheep. Sometime that night, Vince wrapped the dog leash around Dalton's neck. The day after killing his father, Dr. Vince Gilmer worked a full day, 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening, and no one, not his nurse, not his receptionist, not a single one of the 15 or so patients he saw that day noticed anything different about him. I now work in that same clinic. I know some of the previous staff. I see Dr. Vince Gilmer's patients. I use his exam rooms. I'm Dr. Benjamin Gilmer. Though we are not related for the last 13 years, I've lived in the other Dr. Gilmer's shadow. I know his story better than anyone except Vince himself. It's a complex, twisting, and often frightening tale. To many people, it doesn't make much sense. Why did a caring doctor become a brutal murderer? A few weeks after Vince killed his father, mine officiated at my wedding on a North Carolina mountaintop, a short drive from Watauga Lake, where the murder occurred. I was looking forward to starting a family in my professional life as Dr. Gilmer. Back then, I had no idea there was another Dr. Gilmer. I had no idea what the other Dr. Gilmer had done. And I had no idea that it would change both of our lives forever. So that was the beginning, and around that time, sometime probably in around 2012, I remember going backstage to one of Johnny's shows and said, hey, there is this crazy story that's happening to me. And he sat down and he listened. At that point, I was like starstruck just to be in the back room with Johnny Irion. And he started asking questions.
Hold on a second. You're the rock star. I'm starstruck to be here with you tonight. Where were we that night? Where was that? Do you remember?
I think we were at the ISIS Theater.
Okay.
And Johnny was like, really? Is this true? Are you making this up? And I wasn't making. Do you remember this?
Well, this still happens when I tell people about the book that haven't read the book.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, I do remember it now at ISIS. Yeah.
So this is a story that traverses many stories. It's a story that we'll share with you tonight, but it's a story that touches our American culture. It touches our American psyche. It touches the way we think about ourselves. It touches our preconceptions, as Johnny brought up earlier. It touches the way we see punishment. It touches the way we see crime. And it touches ultimately the way we see how we heal in America. So it's many things. This is not a murder mystery story. It is a medical mystery story. But it's about two men who came together and discovered one another. Yeah. So through this process, and this process has been going on now for about 13 years, music has been really important to me. It's been a type of therapy that it's dragged me along, it's healed me, it's propelled me, it's inspired me. So I want to ask Johnny a question. Tell me how do you envision music as it tells a story, as it unfolds in people's minds, and how it inspires others?
Wow. Well, you know, music can heal. And I think that's the biggest mystery about music, the healing powers that it has, how a melody or breaking through to someone you don't know and what is conveyed in melodies and through the heart, it has major healing powers. And one thing I'd like to just say that, from the book, and you were talking about how we look at the world, I was with some friends the other day, and there was a homeless person on the side of the street. And somebody in the car said, "There's McDonald's right there. You should get a job." And I was just like, I just read Dr. Gilmer's book. I didn't say this out loud, but I was like, you don't know what's going on right there. You don't know what's going on with that person. And I feel like this book has so many onion layers of preconceptions of how we think things are, And I do feel like music has the power to just crush through all of that and get to the heart of any individual. I don't know if that really answered your question or not, but
Yes.
The book had such an empowering thing to where I look at the world differently now, and I'm like, oh my God, he's not just lazy, he's probably got some really crazy issues, that somebody needs to take a look at, and we're not able to talk about these things as much as we probably should, and that's why I feel like the book is so important at this juncture in American history.
One thing I've learned from the writing process has been that, and through trying to use this story as a tool for changing politics, for transformation, is that stories touch people differently. Music touches people differently. It's a way to cut through the biases. It's a way to cut through the whole left hemisphere of your brain. Like your left hemisphere of your brain acts as a shield in many ways and creates different mantras within which we spin all the time. And some of those mantras tell us what the world looks like. Some of those mantras even lie to us. But telling a story bypasses so much of that and heads to the other side, to the right side of the brain, where the feelings, where the emotions, where the creativity, where the sparks occur. And so that it's an expeditious way to get to people's minds and to get to their souls.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm going to read you a little story about Broughton Hospital. I was inspired by Jessica's book club. I joined the Connect book club this year, and it outlined. Thank you, Jessica.
How about a nice round of applause for
Yes.
Jessica, by the way? So fun to be back here at Connect.
Jessica is a hero to put this all together. It's incredible how much work it takes to put a festival like this on. But in this book club, I learned that and I've been sort of adaptive in terms of thinking, how do we get from an idea to actual advocacy or change?
Right.
And that's a good metaphor for this whole festival. And for me, in most of my life, I've practiced curiosity to the point of pathology, but curiosity has been a big motivating factor for me. And curiosity is key as a gateway to starting anyone's advocacy journey, because curiosity leads to intentional inquiry. And that was the second step in this book for me, was being curious about this man that I inherited as a mentor almost. He was the predecessor in my very first job as a doctor. And so when I started in the clinic, everyone wanted to ask about the other Dr. Gilmer. They wanted to know what happened to him. Of course, I didn't know what happened to him. There was no connection between me and him. But they sensed something was not right. And I sensed something was not right, but all I knew was that he was a premeditated, cold-blooded murderer, which is what the judge said about him, and that he killed his father in cold blood. That was my preconception when I started this practice.
10 years ago? It's a 10-year journey?
It's about 13 years, yeah. And so the curiosity part of advocacy was really important to me because I became open enough to be curious about his life and what his life was like before this tragic event happened. And that opened me up and allowed me to start a path of inquiry, which is step 2. And that path is very important because it's an intentional one. It's one that you have to be drawn towards. There has to be some both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and it takes work to be in an inquirist path.
Well, I'm thinking, I listened to the This American Life on the drive down. I hadn't listened to it in a while, and I read the book back in February, and that was one thing. It seemed like there were so many steps, and in the interview, it was like, I don't know. There were a couple times you're like, I don't know what to do with this, and then obviously you figured out each step. I just have a quick question. Like, what kept motivating you to go to the next step? Like, was it was the curiosity, obviously, but each step seemed harder and harder, and I admire your tenacity, and thank you for that. But were there certain things at certain steps that kept you going, or like major milestones? You're like, you saw a green. What, if you could explain just a little bit some of the steps, what got you through some of the steps, because there are a lot of them.
Yeah, I think all of us when we begin this pathway, we need help. It takes a team to pursue advocacy. It takes a team to put together a festival like this. And for me, it was about identifying firstly with a man that I thought in my heart that something was not right, and that curiosity with an overlaying mantra of do no harm. That's what we all sign up for as doctors, to do no harm. And with another mantra from one of my mentors, who's Albert Schweitzer. I was an Albert Schweitzer Fellow in Africa, and one of his mantras was, I want to make my life an example, or my life is an example. And so that's always been a thread for me throughout my process in terms of pursuing service in medicine. But I think we all know that, at least for me, each step is
different.
It's different. It's a step that leads to another place, and then that place calls upon you, and then the next step calls upon you, and then there's random coincidence, like the universe putting 2 Dr. Gilmers in a teeny tiny clinic in Western North Carolina.
Same age?
He's a little bit older than me, but when I stepped into the clinic, I was his age. So I picked up where his life ended and carried forward. So I was also drawn to this because it seemed providential at the time, or just completely bizarre, this coincidence. But it also felt like that it was supposed to happen, that I was supposed to be there, and that like, what is the coincidence of a neurobiologist turned rural doctor ending up in a clinic with a guy who shared the same name? Like, it was just too, it was beyond coincidence, and that really drawn me up to a point. After inquiry comes transformation, and through this process, through the discovery of the other Dr. Gilmer, through the discovery of myself, because this was the beginning of a career. This was the beginning of a family. It was the beginning of so many things, and it felt like a calling at the time. Let me read another little passage here. This was part of the calling. I think for a lot of us, like, suffering is a part of the calling. In medicine, we're sort of drawn to it. And that summer, I met these 13 girls, these adolescent girls who were struggling. It was the first time that I'd been inside of a mental hospital. It was the first time that I'd seen people with brains who were truly struggling. and it affected me. Every morning, Deirdre accompanied me to work along a beautiful tree-covered walk to the locked west wing of the adolescent ward, where my patients, 13 highly emotional adolescent girls, waited for me. In their short time on earth, these young women had already experienced more hardships and racked up more diagnoses than I could imagine. They were, in my fledgling psychiatric terms, messed up. And me, I was fresh bait to them. I bought all of their stories, hook, line, and sinker. Those stories still remain vivid in my mind. The young woman, a girl really, who had been in an LA gang for almost half of her life, and had she confided in me one day, killed a man. The girl from Chicago who had been abused by 3 separate sets of foster parents. The girl from Charlotte who looked like an 8th grade honor student, hair in a neat ponytail, a stuffed Winnie the Pooh in one arm, and a book in the other, who had threatened to kill her mother. They were sweet, but also volatile. Bipolar disorder and either physical or emotional trauma were the norm for these children, and almost daily one of them had to be restrained due to extreme outbursts. There was a sense of learned helplessness in them that was wholly unfamiliar to me as a privileged middle-class kid who had been nurtured his entire life. At the age that I was collecting baseball cards, they were receiving their first psych diagnoses. Unlike mine, their childhoods had been fragile and dangerous, and they had imagined their futures to be no different. They knew Broughton was their last refuge before going to juvie, and in their minds, they had already lost the game of life. Their stories wounded me. The wounded part, I think, draws a lot of us to whatever artistic expression you want to pursue. Anger and fear and suffering is I can imagine, Johnny, is part of your music too. Do you want to tell me about that?
Yeah, what happened? Can I ask you a question really quick? There's a part in the book, not a spoiler alert here, but something's supposed to fly. Is that what happens? They're looking for something. They're looking out the window for something.
So I didn't know what to do with these girls that summer. One thing I wanted to do was to give them an opportunity to dream for the first time. And so I had this idea that I'm a paraglider pilot, that I would fly from the top of the mountain near the hospital. So I had all the girls lined up in a window. And I got to the top of the mountain. I unfolded the wing. I was waiting for the right moment to launch. And the plan was to fly over the hospital, to have them see me, to wave to them. They were locked up. They couldn't leave the hospital grounds at that time. And it was I wanted to give them a gift of dreaming again, of imagining what being in the sky would be. And that day the winds blew the wrong direction, which had been the experience of these girls their whole life. The wind had blown the wrong direction. And so I sat up on the mountain and just imagined these girls looking through their locked window, looking for me to fly over, and I never came.
But the thought of doing that and giving that to them, that's what I love to do with music. That's what, just a thought or a piece of happiness, something that where you can, okay, we've all been through a hurricane, we've been through a death, we've been through whatever, but whatever the music can do to soothe that or add some joy, to bring some joy to a situation, that's really my goal with what I try and do. And I hope that happens sometimes. Yes, I get bummed out and, woe is me, heartbreak, that stuff. But that's a big thought, what you were going to do. And that's a big heart space to give to these people. So that's what I would like to do with music, and I hope I've been doing that. So to answer your question.
I love that. I mean, the heart space that you talk about that's what arts does for brains.
Right.
it opens them up. It channels to the parts of the brain that enable emotions.
And being vulnerable, to be vulnerable. I have been there. I've done that, and maybe you have too. And maybe we can get through it together. Maybe we can talk about it.
So these girls that summer reminded me what vulnerability was. I mean, I didn't know vulnerability growing up. I was a privileged white kid, went to medical school. So I didn't know what a fallible mind was until I saw those girls, and that was the beginning of an idea. Those girls were super important to me because they taught me what all of us can become, that we can become cognitively vulnerable or cognitively fallible. That's how I describe it in the book, and that it can happen to any one of us. I mean, I was in clinic all day today and saw, gosh, half of my patients were outside of that resiliency zone where they were vulnerable, they were wounded, and we see this all around us, which is why music is so important, I think.
Well, that's one thing that came up in the book several times. We're all just one step away, and realizing that within ourselves that it can happen to us just like that. I love that in the book. That was really, really helpful for me.
So part of the story is looking at the brain, looking at the different layers that can contribute both to our strength, the amazing resiliency that our brains have, but also to the extreme vulnerability. And the story of Vince Gilmer was a story of that. It was a story at looking at his brain and looking at the different variables that affected him. So as I became more curious about him, I learned to appreciate that, or at least I had theories about what happened to him. I had theories that his brain had been compromised by several things. I had a bunch of kind of neurobiologic or psychiatric theories about what happened to him.
And this is before you went to see him.
This is before. So ultimately, I became a little paranoid about what was happening, and there was a certain level of fear that propagated that inquiry, that inquirist path, and that led to reaching out to Sarah Koenig, who's a reporter for This American Life, a journalist, an amazing journalist, and she came down to help me perform a very intentional inquiry into what happened to Dr. Gilmer. And ultimately, I wrote him a letter, and then he wrote me back. And I'm going to read a little of that letter, and then Johnny's going to play an amazing song. Most people don't go to prisons. I had never been to a prison, and this was my first experience. And there's a reason why we don't go to prisons, because they are hidden from us. They are hidden off the back road. They're hidden up in the mountains. They are not in a place where the public can see them for a very obvious reason. Sarah and I drove up the mountain in the dead of winter, ascending through the dense fog that still blanketed the frigid Big Stone Gap Valley. It reminded me of being lost in the clouds once while paragliding, dangerously losing all orientation, except for the sun above that guided me to the west. As Sarah and I neared the crest of the ridge, we emerged into a glittering field of ice crystals and light, a scene so beautiful we had to pull the car off the road. I needed this pause to collect myself and embrace the unknown that awaited us. We both marveled at the beauty of the mountains and nature's light show glistening through the frozen trees. Though reluctant to get back into the car, we eventually crept up the final stretch of the prison road. And there in the distance, high above the valley floor, carved into the very side of the mountain, appeared a hulking edifice. 7 L-shaped buildings surrounding a central fortress, like blades of a throwing star. It looked out of place, like someone had dropped the Pentagon directly into a national park. Sarah and I were headed on a crash course toward it. It was January 2003. Finally, after months of investigating, we were on the way to confront Vince Gilmer. All that morning, I nervously folded and unfolded the same piece of thin notebook paper. By then, I'd read it so many times, I'd practically had it memorized. I'd carried Vince Gilmer's unopened letter to me around in my briefcase for a week before summoning up the courage to open it. Even then, it had taken a few stouts and the support of my friend Jay Lutzi to get the image of a murderous, hulking Vince Gilmer, his face crumpled in rage, out of my head long enough to break the seal of the envelope. But once I opened it, I couldn't stop reading. Even that morning, just hours before visiting him, sitting with Deirdre and Sarah in a diner in Big Stone Gap, Virginia, I'd taken it out of my wallet to read it again, as though I'd find something in there that would unlock the mystery of Vince Gilmer. Aggression, the letter began, in a handwriting I can only describe as a madman's scrawl. Jagged and childlike, huge letters, some of them written backward, colliding with each other the same way that Kai's did. Kai's my son. Violence, it continued. Serotonin-deprived brain. The handwriting got indecipherable for a while, 3/4 of the way down the page, but it ended clearly, unambiguously. Please help.
I remember when you said that, a madman scrawl, and that got in my head. And then after reading the book, I wrote the song. One thing that I find crazy is that there is no music in prison. Isn't that true? I mean,
it's true for most prisons. There's no music.
But now they can buy MP3s like at a jacked up price or something, which is crazy. But just to think of when I was after you going there and there's no music there, and here's a guy that should be somewhere else. I've recorded the song, just a little demo in my studio, and so this is the first time I've ever played it in front of people. So I'll give it a shot. We got no one to say. We were who we were, and we passed this way. If no one knows us like we didn't exist, the reasons for being are totally missed. Nobody knew what was going on inside of me and why it went wrong. I never wanted to turn so bad. It was just a result of the disease I had. And as these moments turn to memories, without them we have no history. Like a faded message on a forgotten wall, as if it was written in a madman's scrawl. And what's been done has been done. Now my heart is beating like a broken drum. Too tired to fight, nowhere to run. Holding a ticket to kingdom come. And as these moments turn to memories, without them we have no history. Like a faded message on a forgotten wall, as if it was written in a madman's scroll. Madman's scroll, written in a madman's scroll. Nice singing. I didn't know you could sing. I didn't know you could.
I wish Vince could be here tonight. Music means so much to him. And it would have really touched him.
I can't wait to play it for him.
So this leads us to the next venture, transformation. And I feel like music has been so transformational to this journey. Hearing Johnny you write these songs has just been amazingly important to this journey, and it's made me think about like what is the music that people experience in prison? It's silence. Silence for a lot of people. So this journey ultimately, to flash forward, came to a point where after seeing him in prison, it was clear, it was obvious that he had a disease. And the spoiler alert is that we diagnosed him with Huntington's disease, and Johnny knows a lot about Huntington's disease. Do you want to say just something about that?
Well, everyone that saw Vince, even during the trial and leading up to it, Dr. Bowie, 2 visits, and he sees Vince. And he's like, what if he has Huntington's? I mean, it's a mind blower to me. That's how little we know about the disease, I guess, in certain not medical circles, but like, I guess just in the general public, whether it's in law enforcement or if somebody's got a twitch or they're doing something, this goes back to preconceptions. It's like, oh, he's on some drugs. He's totally wasted, but he's has the oncoming of Huntington's disease, and I've learned a lot about Huntington's disease through my wife, Sarah Lee Guthrie. Her father's Arlo, and her grandfather was Woody, and Woody Guthrie died of Huntington's disease. And it was actually Marjorie Guthrie that started Huntington's HD, and she went around, we've traveled the world, and she did a lot of banging on doors and finding out, getting communities together to support this disease because nobody knew what it was. And the early 60s, there was a little bit of knowledge, but I was with Arlo and Nora last night, and I gave Arlo the book, and I was like, you got to read this. And it's a heavy disease, the way it takes over the body. And I mean, it took down Woody Guthrie, and nobody was going to take down Woody Guthrie, but HD took him down. So it's there's not a lot known about the disease. I don't think a lot of Americans know about the disease.
Not too many. The backdrop for Vince is that he was diagnosed as a malingerer. So throughout his trial, people believed, like, the preconception that everyone from the judge to the detective to the prosecutor, everyone believed that he was faking symptoms. And these symptoms we now know were Huntington symptoms. If that diagnosis had been made in 2004, he would never have stepped 1 foot into a prison. It would have been a different course, for sure. And Huntington's is sort of a sneaky disease at first. It expresses itself as depression, anxiety. It's a psychiatric disease in the beginning. Towards the end, it becomes something much more sinister, becomes neurologic. And that aspect of the disease is what claimed Woody Guthrie's life. The beginning part of the disease, you could argue, even contributed to the genius of Woody Guthrie, because the disease makes you a little bit more impulsive. It makes you fearless. It changes your awareness of the world in a way that can sometimes be bad, but sometimes it could be good. Like, it enabled Vince to be an amazing doctor. Like, his patients, our patients, they wanted me to be like him.
To cut through.
Yeah, they wanted me to be more human, to be closer to them, in the same way that Woody Guthrie was so close with his music and in our country. Yeah. I'm going to read one little passage, and then we got another song for you. Part of this book is about what do you do if you realize something is not right? Like, what do you do? How do you begin? And part of that for me came from the life and the example of Albert Schweitzer. But I didn't really understand what Schweitzer meant until I was within a few miles of the Ogooué River myself. What had always seemed basic and obvious revealed itself as intentional and radical. As an idea, it was so simple that a child could grasp it. But as an actual ethic, something you did every day, it had immense power. It sounded easy, but in actuality, it was perhaps our greatest human challenge. All these thoughts ran through my mind as I distractedly went about my days, waiting for an announcement from the governor's office at any moment. I thought of Albert Schweitzer stepping over chickens and stray dogs to get to his patients. I thought of Vince Gilmer at King Creek, holding mice in his hands, then releasing them into the fields. I thought of my pastorly fathers serving last rites to their dying patients and parishioners. I thought about removing the breathing tube from my patient's larynx, surrounded by his family. I remembered all the men Vince had told me about, there in the prison with him, the boy in his 20s who heard voices at night, the middle-aged man who spoke about his imaginary friend like he was a real person, the gentleman in his 60s whose dementia was so bad he didn't even remember day-to-day that he was in prison. What did reverence for life mean? For people like this, for Vince, what was left to revere? Reverence for life is a philosophy that basically is a very simple one. It's very obtainable, but it's so hard for all of us to recognize that every organism, every being, every human is trying to survive just like we are. And turning that reverence back to them. Trying to think about others' journeys like our own. Yeah.
Want me to play the song? I've actually played this song on this stage with the Guthrie family, and I thought this would be an appropriate tune to do, because this was a song written by Woody Guthrie, and but he never put the music to it. There's over 2,800 songs in the archives that the music was never put to them. But Nora, Arlo's sister, is in charge of the archives, and she's an amazing woman. She's done an amazing work with HD and Huntington's and getting these lyrics out to certain artists. And so this is a tune that one of my favorite bands, Wilco, put the music to, and I'll sing it for you. There's a line in here, I feel like this scribbling might stay. And I can't help but think it was one of the last ones that he wrote, because he was doing that. So sometimes I think I'm gonna lose my mind. It don't feel like I ever do. I've loved so many people everywhere I went. Some too much, others not enough. I don't know. I may go down or up or anywhere, but I feel like this scribbling might stay. Maybe if I hadn't seen so much hard feelings, I might not could have felt other people's. So if you think of me, if and when you do, just say, oh well, another man's done gone. Just say, oh well, another man's done gone. Say, oh well, another man's done gone. Just say, oh well, another man's done gone.
Wow. It must be really nice being a rock star, Johnny.
It's nice to be playing in front of people again, I can tell you that right now. Thank you.
I mean, the lines of another man's been gone.
Another man's done gone, which
Done gone.
I was doing a little research in the hotel last night about that song. And the original, this is a typical Woody Guthrie folk process, you know. That was an older song by Vera Hull, and it was an old Chain Gang song. And I didn't know that until I haven't sung the song in a very long time, but I just felt like there was a lot of parallels between what's going on in the book, and the words, and the sentiment. And but that song dates back before Woody actually used, just say, oh well, another man's done gone.
He knew it was coming, didn't he?
Yeah, I think the line too, maybe if I hadn't seen so much hard feelings, I might not could have felt other people's.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there is some insight to what you're saying about the disease, him being able to cut through, and I don't know. I'm just, it made me think about that though. It definitely, I was like, oh, wow.
It made me think about several things. One is that once somebody's put in prison, they don't get out. Like, if you have a life sentence,
Right.
That's another man who's done gone. The diagnosis of Huntington's or ALS or Parkinson's, many of these neurologic diagnoses it's a death sentence too, in a way.
That's one thing about the book too that really was very enlightening about the incarceration, how many mentally ill people are actually in the wrong spot,
And if Vince had been in Woody Guthrie's spot, if he had been in this hospital, his trajectory would have been completely different. He's still in prison today, and I'll tell you a little bit about at the end, but his trajectory has been one of pain and suffering, and I would even say torture. He joins the other 800,000 people, incarcerated people, who have severe mental illness. 800,000. Keeping in mind that 25% of the world's population of incarcerated people are here in America. That means 40% of all incarcerated people have severe mental illness, right? Like, when you think about that, when you apply the inquiry process to it, and if you imagine, after taking the Hippocratic Oath, like you can't accept that.
That's why I feel that's another layer of the book that's just incredibly powerful for today, the world we live in today. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, the story is ultimately about a pursuit for justice.
Yeah.
And through this arc, we battled 3 different governors of Virginia. We were rejected twice. And in January of 2018, we received the first rejection by the Honorable Governor Terry McAuliffe, who wanted to be president that year. And that was why this book came to fruition, because I tapped into my reptilian brain and got really angry. and that was the part of the motivation, is after realizing that our political process is so deeply ingrained in our culture of mass incarceration, it's hard to stomach that. Yeah. So, one more little passage. We want to save a little bit of time so we can have a conversation together. So part of this is the very naive discovery of like what is our mental health system, what is mass incarceration for me. And you would have thought that I would have known something about it after going to college, going to medical school, doing a couple master's degrees along the way and a fellowship. And
that's why I think the book is so important, because I didn't know that, and
Yeah.
I was just like reading, going, "Oh my gosh," and I'm having these conversations with my friends now, and it's a bad deal.
Well, there's just not enough kind of moral education or social justice education in our professional schools, whether that be a medical school or a law school, and so part of the intention for this book was to highlight to students like what this means and how you can become a part of it too. And was that where we wanted to rehabilitate our most broken minds? As Vince's experience in Virginia taught me, most states lack comprehensive programs to treat their mentally ill, incarcerated populations. Most prisons don't staff a full-time psychiatrist. There is no ongoing therapy to address the reasons why an inmate might be there in the first place. That means illnesses go undiagnosed and untreated, putting prisoners at risk for violence, worsening mental illness, and once they are freed, a higher rate of recidivism. Vince had told me once, if you are mentally ill, it only gets worse in here. It's only a matter of time before the mental hell catches up with you. That really struck me. After we did the This American Life podcast and we had 15 million people listen to it, guess what the judge who convicted Vince Gilmer did? That very day he called the governor of Virginia, who called the head of the Department of Corrections, who sent an entourage down to fire the only psychiatrist in this prison that's considered to be the mental health prison of the whole state of the Commonwealth of Virginia. The warden said no. He stood up and said no. And it took them a few months before they could get rid of him. But that man, Dr. Colin Angliker, was a real hero. To me and to his patients, certainly to Vince, he was the one who enabled us to get the genetic testing to confirm the diagnosis. He was the first person in over a decade to question.
He put his job on the line.
He put his job on the line. He put his career on the line. But he was the first person to question this bias that so many people had. And it reminds me of how powerful biases and preconceptions can be. How powerful diagnosis can be. It's hard for us to even change diagnoses in a patient's chart, but there is no motivation to change a diagnosis or a preconception for an inmate or an incarcerated person. And the deck is stacked against them. So to work towards getting Vince Gilmer out of prison took $1 million. It took a book, took an evolving film. It took Johnny Irion writing songs. It took senators. It took governors. It took Brian Stevenson. And it failed until recently, and I'll share that in the end. Yeah. I can't wait for this next song. Can you play it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's gonna cry. Please join me.
I guess we'll talk about the book being stopping the presses on the book after the song.
Sure.
Stop the presses. Well, the governor granted me clemency. I'm going home. I'm gonna walk away from these broken days and I'll be gone. I'll leave this cage and fly as free as a wild bird song, like a heart that's where it's meant to be. I'm coming home, coming home. Gonna walk down by the riverside, just like I used to do. And if I don't come home till the sun goes down, well, that's okay too. I won't hear those iron doors slamming down the hall. I ain't asking for much, but when I'm free, I'll have it all. Oh, the governor granted me clemency. I'm coming home. I'm gonna walk away from these broken days and I'll be gone. I'll leave this cage and fly as free as a wild bird song, like a heart that's where it's meant to be. I'm coming home, coming home. Like a heart that's where it's meant to be. I'm coming home. Let me sing it. Like a heart that's where it's meant to be. I'm coming home.
Anybody crying yet? So in January of this year, leading up to Christmas, things were not looking good for our case. Like the governor had not ruled on our case after we had waited 3 years after submitting our second round of clemency petition. And by the time Thanksgiving came around, I got a bunch of books from Penguin Random House before everything happened. And these were pre-release copies and sent them to the governor's office. Every single person in the governor's office got one. And the day after Thanksgiving, one of the heads of the parole board called me in tears and said, "Oh my gosh, like, I can't believe this happened. Like, something's gotta change here." And we waited, and we waited, and the governor's end of his term was coming up after Christmas as we moved into January, and we had to go to the press. We had to put, the book had to start printing because there's been a back order of paper and other problems in the pipeline with the printing these days. And so on a Friday night, the book was ready to be published. And that night, the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Virginia called, and she said, "Hold on, we think that the governor might move on your clemency petition." The same governor who rejected it just a few months before. And we waited through the weekend. We waited on Monday. We waited on Tuesday. And on Tuesday night, they had to start printing. And that's what happened. So the books went to the press. Wednesday came around. Thursday came around. And they announced that they were going to release Vince Gilmer. And then on Friday was the last day of the governor's term. The governor, by the way, who's a neurologist, who knows something about fallible brains, who knows something about our own human resiliency and shared vulnerability. But he came through. He came through in the end.
Stop the presses.
So this kind of led us to believe and really think about, well, what does it mean to heal crime? Is it possible? Can we do it? What does it mean to reframe the whole architecture of crime and punishment in our country? What does it mean to see punishment through clinical eyes? This was very interesting for me, Johnny, because when you see things through a clinical lens, or when you write a song, you're writing a song because out of very pure reasons. And our pure reason in our profession is to heal people. We don't care about the politics of healing someone. We don't care where they come from. We don't care how much money they have. We do it because it's what we do. That was a nice pause there. We also do it because it's the right thing to do, and when you do it as a team, which is what this whole process has been. It's been an act of teamwork, of collaboration that includes many different people. This is part of it right here. We want to encourage other artists to be part of it, to write songs like Johnny has kicked it off tonight, to tell stories, to inspire other people to tell their story. And to try to reframe this concept of healing rather than punishing. It sounds kind of absurd to some people, but when you think about it, there are other cultures that are doing this. There are cultures that are proud of getting people out of prison as soon as they can, rather than keeping them in prison for as long as they can. Trying to look at each incarcerated person's fallible brain, trying to understand what got them there, trying to understand the dynamics that affected what led them to that day. For Vince, it was many things. He had been sexually abused by his father his whole life. That was a big part of it. It wasn't just Huntington's that enabled his brain to start unraveling. It was that plus long-term depression, PTSD, a traumatic brain injury, which is what my preconception was. I thought he had a traumatic brain injury, which he did, that contributed to his delusions, which led to the demise of his father that day, unfortunately. So there are many things that can bring us to that precipice of facing our darkness, and he's faced that darkness for the last 18 years, and hopefully in the next few months we'll be getting him out.
Thank you. It's been an honor to sit here with you, and it's such an inspiring book. And I, we should probably take some
Yeah.
questions, but can I ask one really quick? So what can we do locally? Like what can we do? What can we do?
So a lot of people ask this question: how do you get involved in something that seems so big? There's low-hanging fruit everywhere, and locally, everybody can write their story. That's the first thing. Everybody has a voice. That's what I've learned from this process. But locally, there are things happening already. There are many associations, there are many advocacy groups in each community throughout the country that are trying to do this amazing work, connecting with them, learning how you can, take that into your community, whether that be broadening the concept of what it means to provide social work or social therapy to law enforcement agencies. In North Carolina, one thing that we're doing is that this book is going to be read by the Mental Health Caucus of the legislature. It was a group of 60 congressmen and women and senators who are going to get together, who are reading the book right now. We're going to get together hopefully with the governor and the secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services, and we're going to have this conversation, but we're going to do it through story, not through politics. And we're going to talk about the pragmatic reasons why it's it's much cheaper, it's much healthier to treat people, not to throw them in prison behind bars. So explore what's happening in your community, to tell your own story. That's what this book is. It's an invitation. Jessica, you out there? Can we turn the lights on in the house so we can see these fine people? And wow, there are many of you.
Check, 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 check. We have some questions from anybody in the crowd?
Love to hear from you.
Thank you. I have a quick comment and a question. When you were talking about Governor McAuliffe, it put me in mind of Bill Clinton when he was running in 1992. And not only did he not commute the sentence of Ricky Rector, he left his campaign to supervise his execution. And this man was so mentally retarded, he told his jailer to save his pie for him so he could eat it after the execution. This was Bill Clinton. My question is, one of the reasons I became a journalist in the 70s was Geraldo Rivera did an expose on Willowbrook Mental Institution on Long Island, and it was amazing. Showed how people were sitting around in their feces and urine, how they were being abused by, people who are supposed to care for them. And then the next decade, Reagan shut down all the mental institutions in the country, and the idea was that we were supposed to have halfway houses in the community for our mentally ill. And those never materialized because of NIMBYs, is the same mentality as people who don't want homeless shelters in their community, because they're unreasonably afraid of mentally ill people. And so, as you say, the jails, not just the prisons, but also the county jails, have become the largest housers of the mentally ill in this country, where they're not getting treatment. So my question to you, Doctor, is do you think that we should be bringing back mental institutions, but much more humane than the way they used to be? And if so, what do we do about the shortage of mental health workers? The New York Times just ran a big article saying there's even a shortage for people who have money to pay for therapists in this country.
Thank you for that historical context. Like that, you're so right. I mean, the problem back in the 80s, the problem even before then was that we were not ready to receive, the mentally ill coming out of the prison system. Unfortunately, we're still not ready. I mean, I think it's no secret that our mental health system is mired in brokenness. Primary care is mired in brokenness. Part of the calling of this story is to help us think more upstream, which is what it's going to take to re-envision the system. It's going to take thinking beyond, that there are only 3 public state mental hospitals in North Carolina. It's impossible. I mean, their waiting list to get into Broughton Hospital is 6 months to a year. It's absurd. Vince Gilmer is a free man living in prison right now because there is not a hospital that can take him in the whole state of Virginia. And that has to happen before we can bring him home. So this is a failure of our medical system. It's a failure of our culture to recognize what is mental illness and that it's pervasive, especially after COVID. So hopefully these conversations we're going to be having will enable some shift, at least in North Carolina. But this is a universal problem. It's ubiquitous. Every state is plagued by this, and it's going to take more than a decade to pull out. It's going to take a transformation of our entire health system, and that's going to require a greater public access to care.
Do we have another question?
Behind Jessica.
We used to have here in Buncombe County a series of alternative sentencing services, because the general idea is you put somebody in prison, and most people have sentences that they will be coming back out of prison. And if you don't change the reasons why they went into prison, either the poverty, the illiteracy, whatever, when they come back out, now with yet one more ding against them, they're going to wind up back there because you've done nothing to change the situation so that when they come out, they can be productive. Whether it's a mental illness or it's something like they can't read to fill out a job description. The problem that the justice system had at that point was that it was costing a lot to deal with prisoners individually. If it was not a group program, they were no longer going to fund it. And so all of our alternative sentencing services for adults were discontinued. So the programs that we had that helped women who had gotten into prison because of domestic violence or because they were taking the fall for brother or father or boyfriend, or they were part of a family that was just so dysfunctional that that's where they ended up, that program went away. And instead of spending the money to help get these people out of the system, we seem to spend more money to build more prisons. I see one of the major issues is funding. Where are we going to get the funding so that we can deal with the mental health issues? Even when people don't get as far as prison, we still have trouble if people come from a poor family or even sometimes a middle-class family. They can't get the help they need because they can't afford it.
Yes. Thank you. It's going to take a revolution to make this happen. But one thing that the politicians understand is that it's way cheaper, like to put someone in a mental hospital than to lock them away for life or to kill them. The last person to die to be killed by the Commonwealth of Virginia was someone that I intimately knew through the legal team that helped with our case, and Tara McAuliffe killed him. He was another mentally ill person that was floridly mentally ill during the time of his act, and that person also should have been in a hospital. But it's going to take a reimagining of the entire system. Yeah. You need to write a book, ma'am.
Could you talk more about the experience when This American Life and just Sarah coming down and that process of working with them, and anything you want to share with that?
I see my life as sort of a life of studentship. Like in family medicine, we are learning all the time. And so when Sarah came down, I saw it as an opportunity to to learn from her and to be a part of her process. And so and she took me on as a student, so it was really fun to be intertwined with her storytelling and to learn, from her and to, be on the inside of the story. And she's such an amazing journalist. I mean, the way she tells stories, I mean, her success with Serial, the Serial podcast, was born during our pursuit of Vince Gilmer's story. That whole case she discovered through the lawyers we were working with at the Innocence Project. So it was a thrill to be a part of seeing her mind work as a journalist, and that taught me many things and gave me the courage to consider writing this story. But I think seeing the world with student eyes, I want to play guitar next, is a great way to pursue life, to maintain that curiosity and to keep it aflame. And Sarah's like that too. She's deeply curious about everything, and she wanted so desperately to get to the bottom of this story, of Vince's story, to find a unifying diagnosis that would explain everything. So in the book, I write a little bit about seeing a This American Life story from the inside, which is interesting.
And one thing, I was listening to This American Life on the way down, and at one point, she doesn't think you're right. You still believe that there's something going on, and she can't. Not just that she had given up, but she had kind of lost. It seemed like she had lost a little bit of hope, where you were still believing. And I found that really interesting. But obviously,
she was a little more pessimistic.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's even in the even during that process, you were still running up against that. I was like, wow, It's like.
But she held on.
She held on. Thank you, Sarah.
Ira Glass wanted us to go. Ira Glass gave us an extra 5 months to work on the story, because it kept evolving and evolving.
Right.
Yeah.
You got a question?
First, thank you so much for following your calling. It's impactful and it's inspirational. Thank you for doing that. And as you moved through the process and understood what would intrigue people, not just the content itself of the story, but what were the drivers as you were gaining momentum with individuals at higher levels to get the story told?
So what was the driving force at each?
Right, at each
Yeah.
point, sort of what were those driving forces that heightened curiosity, but then helped people transition into actually working with you to get the story told?
Yeah, I mean, there was to some degree there was just the challenge at every step that was exciting and kind of inspired us to keep going. I'm also a person that just doesn't take no for as an answer. So every time we hit a roadblock, and this is something that Schweitzer talks about too in his philosophy. He talks about moving boulders, that you have to move boulders in your path, that they're always going to be there. And so we had many boulders in our path. We had to find a law firm. That would contribute a lot of money and support us. We had to, connect ourselves with people who were embedded in the political system in Virginia, people who didn't want to talk to us. We had to keep our family intact. We had to, I had to keep my job rolling. There were boulders at every step of the way. And I think if you see those boulders as a challenge rather than a roadblock, then it fueled my fire along the way. But once the biggest boulder was making the diagnosis, and once that happened, that was like an explosion that went off. And it gave us, in the story on This American Life, was another explosion. It gave us opportunities to connect. And really, it is about connecting. And I'm not special, but part of my kind of ADD brain is being able to connect and not being fearful of making the phone call to the governor or asking Johnny to write us 2 beautiful songs. That's part of it. It's part of the philosophy too of this weekend. how do we connect? How do we take it to the next step? But it's for me. It was all right. We made it this far. This is where we're doing next. This is what we're doing next, and we're not going to stop until we get to the end. Yeah.
We have time for one more quick question so that Ben can, you are going to sign some books out there, right?
So we'll be out front during the intermission. Malaprops brought books. Thank you, Malaprops. Support our independent bookstore in town. Yay.
Any one last dying question somebody wants to ask? Going once, going twice. All right.
One more thing I want to thank to Zach Kilberg where's Zach? Who's right here, who has been our fearless leader of the film project that's been going on now for years. Talking about connecting, I connected with Zach. I'll never forget the first moment we were at Leaf together, and I was like, Zach, I'm gonna need your help. And we have a story that has to be told, and Zach jumped in, and he's been such an ardent believer all of these years. He's stuck with me, and I don't know if you want to say just a brief.
I don't know, Mike, but I'm part of Social Construct, which are the film partners of the Connect Beyond Festival, and we've been working with Jessica since the 2018 festival, and Benjamin, actually, when we first started developing the project as a film, before you had your book deal and everything like that, you actually participated in the first Connect, so it's been a real just kind of uniting force in this project. And basically, Social Construct, we tell a lot of true stories, a lot of impactful stories. Our most recent project was called The Mauritanian, which was based on a New York Times bestselling book. And so when we started working with Benjamin, we basically put all the pieces together, and we're currently in development with an amazing director, Jennifer Fox, who's Emmy award-winning, did a movie called The Tale with Laura Dern that came out a few years ago. And we're partnered with a studio called Concordia, which is backed by Elaine Powell Jobs, Steve Jobs' widow, who's just an incredible kind of backer of impact projects. And we're deep in the script writing process right now. So that's been really exciting. Jennifer, our director, has been to Asheville for months at a time, basically working with Benjamin and I on the script, and it's in a really exciting place. So we're hoping that we can be in a position to actually start production later this year, ideally in the Asheville area. So again, just kind of adding more media opportunities to try and get the word out about this issue, or using media to promote other important issues that need more attention. So Benjamin and Johnny, this is just it's such an honor to have you guys here and sharing your book with the audience. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Zach. Jennifer Fox wanted to be here tonight, but she couldn't. And Jennifer, if you're watching, we really missed you tonight. Thank you, all of you, for coming. Thank you to my family and friends for being here and supporting. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of this weekend. It's going to be amazing. The film tonight is going to be amazing, and I would love to sign a book for you out in the lobby.
Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we will take a little 30-minute break. You can go get a drink, go get a book signed, and then at 8 o'clock.